When I find myself in times of trouble, Space Commanders come to me.
Walt, do not take their name in vain.
Telling me what to say from space.
Walt, seriously, just don't. You know what they're capable of, don't.
From space! From space! From...
James and
Jesus
Walt.
Christ! Oh, I can take his name in vain, though, can I?
I fear him less.
It has been too long since your last assignment. It is time for a new deck with a new theme.
It's true. We haven't actually built them a deck in a while.
But they're gonna abduct us again. I'm supposed to be vocal training the whole day. How could this happen on today of all days?
Are you serious right now? You're the one that was singing and you just had
The deck's
to...
theme is Typal.
Typal? What Typal? There's like 300 different creature types.
Oh, come on, Walt. You've built, what, 30 different Typal decks? You've got this.
There's a bright golden beam from a spaceship. There's a bright golden beam from a spaceship.
What's that from? Don't recognize it.
I wrote this song, actually. We're being abducted, we're going to space, and it looks like a Martian without...
Oh, it's Oklahoma.
Shut up! Let them think I'm cool!
I'm so glad you think peak cool is knowing lyrics to a song from Oklahoma.
Is it not? Is it not? I've been lied to my whole life. People were always like, well, you know, you're so close to being cool. If you could just sing the beginning song from Oklahoma, we would know for sure that you were cool.
We grew up in vastly different circles.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. You could listen to 5 or 6 podcasts, or just one. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I am the Walrus Cuckoo Cachoo, James.
I see. Beatles.
I went for,
Very good.
Just
you know what you're
subtly,
doing.
yeah.
You know what you're doing.
All right, well, we're stuck back in space. But before we address the fact that we're not getting home until we build the Space Commanders yet another deck,
Yeah.
I just wanted to let all the lovely listeners out there know that on the 17th of February, you are going to want to make yourself available because Walt and I are going back on Twitch, but not at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
No.
We're going to be online from about, 10 o'clock in the morning?
So I don't even know what... Yeah, put in 10 a.m. AEDT on the 17th in your calendar. It's probably going to be the Thursday night for you. No,
If
it's a
you're in
Saturday.
the-
It's a Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Saturday, so
Okay,
it'll be
so probably
Friday night.
Friday night
If
for
you're
you.
in the States, yeah.
Honestly, if you're in the States, this might be the best stream for you to tune into.
Yeah, this might be like an actual good time sporting event for you to tune into.
So it's twitch.tv/getcommanded. But yeah, it's Dockside Debacle 3.
We are going to be streaming all day,
Yep.
and it's all CDH.
Yes.
It's so exciting. And I very, very quickly wanted to say I now have backstage access to the decks that are being submitted for the event. And I've been doing my research, and it looks like a fun bracket.
Sick.
As of this episode coming out, if you are Australian, the registrations are actually still open. So
Ooh.
I've linked the Dockside Debacle Australian CDH Discord server in the show notes. If you want to join that server, you can ask questions about the event there. It's all over Spell Table, and you'll have your play commented on by Walt and I.
Yeah.
We know exactly what we're doing. Don't worry about it.
Look, it'll be like that kind of, you know how there's like different sort of makeups of a commentary booth that you can get for a sporting event? I feel like it's going to be, because you've played so much CDH recently, you're going to be the like pro commentator.
I actually know what the cards do
Yep.
and like what the plays are, the lines.
And I'm like when they throw to like Taylor Swift. You know, they're like, hey Taylor, what do you think of the game so far? And she's like, oh my God, it's been so much fun.
Look at the special art treatment on his commander. Isn't it cute?
So yeah, you can look forward to that. And look, I will say that though, if you're new to CDH, you don't know anything about it, don't worry. Me too.
Yeah.
You can join us for the ride.
Genuinely, if you have ever been interested in CDH, I think watching this stream will be really good for you because I'll basically be holding Walt's hand through this tournament. So Walt can be like the surrogate of the audience that doesn't know CDH. So
I can play it dumb. I know what to do.
you play Selesnya stacks. That's not CDH. So.
As I said, I can play it dumb.
All right, well, if you go to twitch.tv/getcommanded, hit follow on that channel and you'll be alerted for when we go live. It'll be very fun. And thanks to the amazing sponsor, Josh and Pat's MTG Bazaar.
Yeah.
Don't want to spoil it too much, but we have a lot of stuff to give away on stream.
Huge amount of stuff to give away. Looking forward to it. But we should get to this bloody reason that we've been abducted in the first place, which is that they want us to build another deck. This is a bit of a recurring theme for them. We've built them a lands deck, an aristocrats deck, a spellslinger deck at this point.
Well, it looks like Typal is the theme type. It's the Typal episode.
Yeah.
We are going to build this together, but I am definitely going to let you lead this. I feel like you're more of an expert in this space.
Look, I've just completed my 4th Goblin Typal deck. That was just my 4th Goblin Typal commander deck, which you would have seen on stream, and the gameplay of that is actually not yet
on YouTube.
But by the time this episode comes out, it
Probably,
may even be. So definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see that. But it's that's the 4th version of the Goblin Typal deck. It's a Vevictus Asmadi deck. So it's actually a dragon in the command zone, but it gives you access to Jund, which is sort of the best goblin colors. And it means you can do some sort of sacrifice stuff, which I'll probably go into a bit later. But that also has now been my 11th Typal commander deck that I have built.
As we were being beamed up to space, I was quickly counting on my fingers all of your Typal decks.
Yep.
I think I've remembered all of them. The fact that 4 of them are goblin types is hilarious.
I know. It's a tough one to get right, but I think I've finally done it. I guess we should clarify, we are using the word Typal in this episode, mostly because the Space Commanders use it and we wouldn't want to go against their wishes. But also, Wizards of the Coast has put out a statement saying that this is the word that they're using when they refer to something that cares about a creature type. We're aware that there's another word that has historically been used for that, even on some cards. It's not being used anymore, and they have been errated to not say that anymore. So we're just going to use the word Typal, and it's pretty obvious what we're talking about. So that's the main thing.
Yeah. If you were wondering.
There you go. So I feel like I want to first talk about why I build so many Typal decks, because this is one thing we definitely differ on.
Well, I've got a few, but my Typal decks, I'm thinking my Scarab God deck, which is a zombie type.
Yes.
I don't know, don't play it like a Typal deck. It doesn't feel like a Typal deck to me. It feels like I'm cheating big things into play and doing weird things with my upkeep and getting extra upkeeps. And so, it never feels like I never feel like I'm making a horde of zombies. I guess.
I mean, Scarab God is one of those decks where the main thing you're doing is actually reanimating. So
it's a reanimated deck first.
Yes. Yeah. Probably if you were going like primary theme, secondary theme, it would probably be Reanimator primary theme, zombies secondary theme.
Yeah,
I think you'd have to
That's how I've built mine anyway. I know a lot of people can build them in different ways, 100%, but that's my zombie deck,
Yes. But I mean, you've got a Yuriko deck as well, and you've got your Hydra deck, but it's funny, even those decks, like your Yuriko deck, obviously, it feels like ninjas, but mostly you're just trying to top deck manipulate is the main thing there.
And turbo out as win in Commander. That's basically the idea.
And then your Hydra deck is actually an X-Spells deck, right? It's, what's the commander's name?
Zaxara the Exemplary.
That's right. It's mostly just trying to cast big X spells, and then the Hydras are like the win con, but it's more about the X spells. So it's interesting. It's like,
to be honest, I built it as an X spells deck first, and then I was like, oh, I make Hydras as well. That's fun.
That's kind of good. Maybe I could do more of that.
Yeah.
Which is like totally a valid way to build Typal, by the way, to have a really strong idea about what you want the deck to do, and that's actually a really good idea. But I mostly build Typal decks because I really like that they so perfectly, like from a Vorthos perspective, they so perfectly capture the feeling of a part of Magic's color pie. So like when you're playing a Goblin deck, you really feel like a Goblin Lord. You feel
Yeah.
like you're sending like hordes of goblins just throwing at the enemies. They'll get blocked, they'll die, but there's always going to be more of them, which feels like what goblins are like in fantasy, right?
I mean, we did the philosophy of red just recently, and it'll
Yeah.
give you that chaos, that energy, that just, I'll do whatever I want. Fly, my little goblins, fly.
Exactly right. But like, even I have a wizard's deck, and my wizard's deck kind of feels like you're a magical genius or something. You've always got the answer, and you're thinking one step ahead and everything.
And you're so good at magic, you can reduce the amount of mana that it... Because you got
Yeah,
Kaza, which
Kaza
reduces the cost.
makes
Yeah.
the spells cheaper. The
I can
wizards,
see that.
The power of the wizards makes the spells easier to cast.
So well educated.
Yeah, I know so much about magic. And then, I've got a knight's deck, and the knight's deck feels sanctimonious. That's the word of the day. Sanctimonious.
And the number?
Of letters in that word, that would be a 13-letter word, if I'm looking at that correctly.
And the color?
Blue.
This has been brought to you by Elmo. That actually wasn't a bad Elmo impression, actually. That was pretty good.
I feel like the best Elmo impressions you kind of stumble into. You just kind of like try it with the voice, and you're like, holy shit, I'm amazing at that.
I bet I couldn't do it again, but actually,
That's not too bad.
That's not a bad Elmo. I have unlocked
It's
a
kind
new
of
talent.
weirdly good.
All right.
You've got such a deep voice. It's so disconcerting coming out of your voice.
Just for clarity, you can confirm I'm the only other person in this
There's
room.
no one else in the room.
That was my voice.
Except my huge imagination.
Pretty proud of that, actually.
That is so strange. Anyway, Typal decks. So yes, that's why you build them. They're fun. They're fun to build. What is Typal? So there are kind of 3 different circumstances I feel like the word Typal gets used in.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on only one of these, which is the first one. That's usually what it's used for, which is a deck built around a singular creature type.
Well, this is what we've been like kind of alluding to
Yeah.
already. Goblins, ninjas,
Yeah.
hydras,
Yes.
humans, wizards,
Yeah.
salamanders, pirates,
All of the above.
Yeah.
That's the win con. That's the strategy of the deck. And yeah, when someone says they're building a goblin Typal deck or a dragon Typal deck, this is what they're talking about. This is a pretty obvious
But there
one.
totally is like other decks that people slap the word Typal onto.
100%. So like people will do it for a theme of the deck. You know what I mean? Like they'll be like, oh, it's a flyers deck. And someone will introduce that like a deck with lots of flying creatures in it. And they'll say like, oh, I've built like a flying theme deck. Or I've built like sometimes a flying Typal deck.
Yeah.
Which is totally fair, like a fair use of the...
Azorius
of the word.
Flyers is a good archetype to build, yeah.
Totally, but it's not... We're sort of moving away from that singular creature type thing.
Sure,
now,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is like a separate thing. And then the other one that they use it for, sometimes called Typal, is when people slap a bunch of different creature types in the same deck, but turn them all sort of into each other.
Using effects like Maskwood Nexus.
Yeah, Arcane
and-
Adaptation.
Yeah.
So everything is every creature type, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, I've got these 10 goblins, but they're also vampires, so I'm going to tap them all with Captivating Vampire and gain control of your creature.
And when your creature comes over, it's now a ninja. So when I deal damage to you, I
Yes.
reveal the top card of my library from Yuriko,
Yeah,
and
and
you
it-
take that much damage.
And in my upkeep, I scry 1 and lose 1. Scry 10 and lose 10 because I have 10 zombies on my battlefield with Scarab God. It gets very silly very quick. Very cool decks. to
Yeah,
build.
like the Reaper King is one of my favorite examples of
Yeah.
this. The Reaper King is this 5-color monstrosity where whenever a scarecrow enters the battlefield under your control, you can destroy target permanent.
Yep,
So
straight up.
we've got a player at our LGS that built a Typal scarecrow deck.
Yep.
It's wild.
It's crazy.
It's very strong.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my main problem with that particular deck is that destroying a permanent whenever any of your creatures enter the battlefield is crazy powerful.
Yeah, that's like Aura Shards times 10, and Aura Shards is already an incredibly salty card.
Yeah, I think it's not even a May as well. I could be wrong, but I think it just straight up says
No, I
destroy
think it says
target.
up to. I do think it says up to,
1.
yeah.
Okay, that's different. But yeah, there are those sort of the 3 main ways people use the word Typal.
Mm-hmm.
For the purposes of this episode, I think we're just going to focus on that first one, which is usually what people do, which is singular creature type, right?
Yeah.
That's the Typal deck we're going
That's
to build.
probably the one that you're wanting to build if you've clicked onto this episode,
Yeah.
I assume.
Or reluctantly listening to if someone was like, hey, your deck sucks, it needs help.
I think that's where most of our podcasts get shared, actually.
People being like, just reading each other, just being like, you suck in this way.
Yeah.
This very narrow and specific way.
Have you listened to the Commander Etiquette episode on Get Commanded? Maybe you should listen to that one.
About 25 minutes in, they start talking about showering. You should really hone in on that one. I think the first question we should answer when we're talking about a Typal deck is how many cards of that type Should you even play?
Well, we've talked about this in the other episodes of deck archetypes where we've built Space Commanders decks before, and we generally call this the thing.
Yes.
Like
how many cards need to do the thing?
Yeah. So if your deck is a Spellslinger instance and sorcery deck, how many instance and sorceries do you run? You know, we've talked about this before. So with creature types, I'm assuming as many as you can stuff into the deck.
I mean, I would say that, like, usually you don't want any less than 25, I think, which is kind of what we said about doing the thing, right? We said 25 to 30 was the good mark for, like, you know, Spellslinger deck, at least 30 instants and sorceries in there.
Yep.
Honestly, Spellslinger, you might want to be higher than that. But yeah, at least 25, and most decks will probably be better with about 30. But I think it's really important to clarify here that with Typal decks, it can depend a lot, because the role your commander fills can vary so much, and then like even the type, like the creature type that you're actually playing can dictate what kind of a deck you're building.
I get that. So like, for example, Krenko Mob Boss, if you're building a Goblins deck around Krenko, you could potentially run less creature type Goblin in your 99, because every single turn you're going to be able to tap Krenko, which will double the amount of goblins you have on the battlefield anyway.
Straight up. And also the thing, I've built a Krenko Mob Boss deck. The other funny thing about Krenko Mob Boss is you so badly want early goblins, and there's actually not that many, like, goblins. You want early goblins and you want lots of them. So you actually end up playing a lot of spells that make goblins.
Like Krenko's Command.
Yeah, or Dragon Fodder. Like, yeah, these sort of like instants and sorceries that cost 2-3 mana or whatever that just say, like, make 2 goblins, make 3 goblins or whatever.
Yeah.
Because the main thing is you just want many of them. But that's kind of funny, because then you're looking at your deck and you're going, how many goblins am I playing? Might only be 20 in a Krenko deck, because you've got like 15 spells that make goblins as well.
I would count that towards the thing.
True.
Yeah, like I would be like, if I'm tagging on Moxfield, I would tag Krenko's Command and Dragon Fodder as the thing.
Yes.
I would, just to make sure that I've got like a, minimum 25 in my deck.
Definitely. But then, like, contrast, even more in this direction of you don't need to play very many of those creatures. A Kaikar deck, and I built a Kaikar. This is the one that when you cast a non-creature spell, you make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. I built a Kaikar deck that was a bit like a spirit Typal deck, and I think by the time I was done with the deck, and I felt like it was as strong as it had ever been, I think there were like 8 spirits in there.
Wow, they would have been like the Kamigawa spirits, right? The ones
ones that you sack
die
to do
and
stuff.
do stuff. Yeah.
Or like there was like one lord, like spirits get +1/+1 and have hexproof. That was kind of good to have as well.
That's not bad.
But yeah, like mostly because Kaikar, when you cast non-creature spells,
you're pooping out spirits every spell. Yeah.
But also you want non-creature spells, like, to trigger your Kaikar. So that was like completely you don't want almost any spirits in that deck actually.
And like my Scarab God deck, it cheats out big creatures and turns them into zombies.
Yes.
So like, I think there's builds of Scarab God where you do want to go full in, all in on zombie type.
Yes, definitely.
But my deck runs things like Sheoldred and that kind of stuff where I can turn Sheoldred into a zombie.
Yeah. And I think there's like a world where someone's built a Scarab God deck with no creature type zombie in there. You know what I mean? They
just like cheat
built
out
a reanimated deck, like play training grounds, make it really cheap, and then just focus all in on just like reanimating as many things as possible. And then you just use the tokens that Scarab God makes
as a little bit of value in your upkeep.
Yeah. And otherwise it's just a reanimated deck. Like that's totally a valid way to do it. But then in that world, you're not playing 25 zombies. You might be playing like 2 zombies.
Yeah. You're definitely not playing Rooftop Storm.
No. That would be bad in that deck. So that's one factor I think is like whether the commander makes the creature. So Scarab God, Kaikar, Krenko, they would mean that you can play less creatures potentially. I think it's also worth asking whether your individual creatures have a lot of impact on the board. And in that case, you can go less. So I'm thinking about specifically types where the creatures tend to be really big and have big ETBs or big like attack damage.
So we're talking the opposite of goblins now, because like a 1/1 goblin is not as scary as like a 12/12 dinosaur, for example.
Dinosaurs are a great example of like you want big dinosaurs. You don't necessarily need lots of them. Angels are another type like this. Like, you only need 6 or 7 angels before you're attacking for 30 damage a turn.
Slamming a Safara or an Avacyn is pretty terrifying.
Totally. And same for the exact same reason, dragons. The quality of the average dragon in Commander is so high that you could be on 20 dragons and you'd probably be fine. Yeah,
there's like even like the really baseline dragons that are just like generally cheap. Have you seen that 5-color 5/5 flying whenever it attacks, draw 2 cards?
No.
Yep. It's 5 mana. It's 6 mana. It's a generic and Wooburg.
Okay.
And it's a 5/5 flying, and whenever it attacks, you draw 2 cards. Like, that's just baseline amazing.
Well, there's like a Taka, the like Gruul dragon for 7, that's just like, when a dragon you control attacks, it gets double strike. It's
Far
like,
out,
if I just have that and 4 dragons that are just like regular 4/4s, that's what, 8, 16, 24, and a Taka might be another like 16. That's like probably 40. I probably have 40 in the air with 4 dragons, and one of them is a Taka. Like,
Yep, as long as you've got those 4 dragons and a good spirit to beat face, you'll be winning the game.
That's just all you need. So yeah, in that case, if the creatures are really big impact, you can play less of them.
I get you.
And then I think the other one, this kind of is very similar to what we just said. If your type, the creature type you're actually playing, because they have very different things they want to do, creature types in Magic. If they want to go tall rather than wide, you can play less of them as well.
So this is like, for example, your Knights deck. You can suit them up with equipment, and because they synergize with equipment in that way.
Yeah, Knights don't generally have lines of text on them that are like, if you attacked with 5 Knights this turn.
Yeah.
You won't see that on a Knight. You'll see a Knight that's like double strike, lifelink.
Give me a sword and send me into battle.
Yeah, buff me up, make me huge, but I will win on my own.
Yeah.
Like I don't need anyone else to help me. And like, I've got a Golem deck, for instance. Like,
that puts +1 counters on golems.
Puts +1 counters on golems, but also like a lot of golems are just, there's a 6 mana golem, there's power and toughness are just equal to the number of creatures on the battlefield.
On your opponent's side as well, it counts everything?
On the whole battlefield.
That's wild.
Someone's got 10 creatures, someone's got 5, someone's got 5, you've got 5, 25 power.
That's going to feel so good when you're like, if you're in like, imagine the Typal pod, right?
Yeah.
You're playing against a goblin deck, an elf deck, someone's playing dragons, and then you're playing golems, and you're like, I'm going to keep this opening hand for no apparent reason at all.
I just have this one guy who's very large. Yeah. So
Fair enough.
That's a reason you could also play less of the creature, right? Is because
Yeah.
they're just going to be bigger in general. So yeah, you're not going to need so many of those. I want to give some examples of like my actual creature counts in some of the Typal decks that I've built.
Sure. I think I've talked about all of my Typal decks, so over to you.
Just about. I can take from here if you want.
Yeah. See you guys.
No,
I'm out.
no.
Bye-bye.
Look, I've built a lot of decks.
Specifically Typal decks.
So many Typal decks.
Can we start with the newest one?
Yes, we can.
Because you played this on stream.
I did.
Literally 2 nights ago for when
For
we
us,
recorded
yes,
this.
but a week exactly.
A week
for
exactly,
you
yeah.
listening to this episode.
And that was sick. I accidentally made a huge mistake in that game. Spoilers for this episode if you
Yeah.
watch it on YouTube.
Go to YouTube if you don't want to be spoiled for this. Or skip ahead a minute or something.
Milled Walt for like 40 cards, 50 cards?
I think it might have been 60 by the end because I think you did it 3 times.
Yeah.
So you had Court of Cunning, which mills in your upkeep. You choose any number of players, and then if you're the monarch,
You milled 10. So
all those players mill 10. So
Yeah.
you can choose yourself, you can choose any number of opponents, whatever. But it's in your 9th Doctor deck, which doubles your upkeep triggers.
Yep.
And you had Sphinx of the Second Sun out.
Yep.
So on one particular turn, I think you went to your upkeep, you had double upkeep, you milled me for 20.
Yep.
And then I think you moved to your post-combat main phase, all the weird stuff that Sphinx of the Second Sun does. Basically, you had another beginning phase, you untapped, you upkeeped twice more, and
So
you
I
milled
would've
me
milled
for
you for
another 20.
40
I think it
on
was
that turn. Yeah.
one more time you got me, and it was another 20. I had in my hand from the beginning of the game.
Which I called, by the
Yeah,
way. I said,
he was aware of it.
it'll be terrible if Walt has this card in hand.
I had a Patriarch's Bidding, which is a 5-mana sorcery where everyone chooses a creature type, and you return all creatures of the chosen type from graveyards to the battlefield.
For the record, I chose Salamander because I had 2 cards in my graveyard.
And none of them were creatures. There were certainly no salamanders there. Yes, I'd been milled for 60. I chose Goblin. All my goblins had haste. I had a Krenko. There's an impact tremors on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So I think
we died just from impact tremors, to be perfectly honest.
I think it was literally all of the goblins ETB, you all took like 20, and then just tap Krenko, you take another 20.
Yeah.
Because there's 20 more goblins.
And they all have haste. Yep.
Yeah.
Silly.
I was going to take the Monarch from you so you would mill me less, and then I was like, I bet James just mills me so much over the course of this game. I'm going to let him have it. Because
I did think it was weird that you didn't want the Monarch. I'm a bad Commander player, everybody.
It's so rare that I game the table, and especially game you, so I have to take them when I can get them,
Yeah, fair enough.
Usually I win by just like, whoopsie, we left Walt alone too long.
This time you were like, you played yourself.
Yeah, you played yourself. Vague Victors. It's super fun. So Vague Victors is a 6-mana creature, but yeah, it's a goblin deck. It's just got a bunch of goblins in there. Basically, the strat of this deck is that Vevictus, when he attacks, every player, you choose 4 permanents, 1 for each player. Everyone sacrifices those permanents, and then they reveal the top card of their library. And if it's a permanent, you just put it on the battlefield.
Yeah, it's like a weird Chaos Warp effect in Command Zone. It's kind of bizarre.
So my deck is built to just have almost only permanents in there. So there's like all mana rocks. There's like 5 spells in the whole deck, instants and sorceries. And consequently, because I want to flip things off the top and I want them to be goblins a good chunk of the time, there are 34 goblins in this deck.
That's the high.
It's a third.
Yeah,
a
that's
third
high.
of the deck is creature type goblin cards.
Wow, that's nearly as many goblins as there are lands in your deck. That's hilarious.
Yeah, similar count. It's a deck where you need to hit goblins a good chunk of the time. Also because if you do this, when you have not a goblin in the command zone, or not the type in the command zone,
That's not counting towards goblins.
no,
Yeah.
so you're going to need more of them in the 99. Another deck that has a lot of creatures of particular type in there, Kaza.
Oh, yeah?
Wizards deck. Runs 29 wizards.
29.
29.
That's more than I thought, because I think the main thing that I think of with that deck is instants and sorceries. But I guess your playstyle is you first want to build up a board of wizards,
Yes.
and then cast 1 instant or sorcery that really blows everybody out.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, Kaza is only as good as how many wizards you have. So if
Yeah.
you have 1 wizard, you play Kaza, reduction of 2, not great. You kind of want a reduction of like 5.
Yeah.
Perfect world. So yeah, you're going to need a lot of wizards to
I love the
make
fact that you've
happen.
got a wizard token generator in that deck. Kasmina.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
still run Kasmina?
I do.
Yeah.
I
It's a
think
planeswalker that down ticks to make a wizard. I've
it's
never
so
seen it
funny.
before.
You also draw a card and discard a card. So it's like...
Do you really?
You do. You
Wow,
loot
that's-
and you make a 2/2 wizard.
Actually, not bad.
And then the static is like basically ward 2 for your creatures.
That's really good.
It's like solid. It's totally
Okay,
solid in the
sure.
deck. I mean, only if you're playing wizards. If you're not playing wizards, don't
Don't play that
card. But I like it a lot. My next deck, this is one that is a lot lower. My Selesnya Golems deck.
Yep. A classic.
So only 19 golems in this deck.
That makes sense. You've got a lot of things that generate golem tokens, though.
Yes. So that's going to help a lot. And my commander is one of them, right?
Yes,
My
yeah,
commander
he
ETBs and makes
a golem.
Makes a golem. So I have a bunch of ways to flicker him in the deck as well, because that's basically like having another golem card. But also, like I said before, golems want to be tall. They don't want to be wide.
Yep.
So if I've got 5 golems, but they're 10/10s, that's fine. I don't need to have 10/10s. 5 is enough.
Yep.
And then, yes, my last example is a deck I don't own anymore, but Kaikar did end up with, I counted actually, 4 spirits were in my Kaikar
Only
deck.
4.
There were 4 spirits.
But it makes sense though. You don't need to put the spirits in the deck because your commander is pooping them out and is pooping them out when you cast non-creature spells. So you need to play non-creature spells. It makes sense.
Every spirit creature type card that you play in the deck is a loss of your commander triggering. It's a very strange deck to build as spirits. It's a great deck to build as storm, but my spirits deck was a very strange example.
So these are like really, really strong examples of like different levels that you go to, because like Vevictus versus Kaikar, that's 34 versus 4. I think the really key thing that I've noticed is like the role of the commander.
Yeah.
And like actually what the commander wants to do.
Yep.
And that dictates kind of how many of the type you should be putting in your deck.
100% right. And I think there's kind of like 3 roles that a Typal commander normally plays. I did read this command in advance, and I scrolled through EDH Rec and just looked at like the top dragons, commanders, elves, goblins, the really popular ones that are played all the time. And I think there's only 3 sort of main roles. Admittedly, one of them is a very broad category, but there's sort of 3 things that your commander can do in the command zone that contribute towards your deck strategy, and the way you build your deck just completely will depend on what role your commander is filling.
Sure.
So the first one is one we talked about already in this episode. I call it the producer.
Oh, so these are like Krenko, Kaikar.
Exactly.
Poops out the creature type.
Yep. Would also include something like Edgar Markov.
Oh, God. If you
don't
okay,
even- you don't even need to get a good
let's
mark.
talk about Typal decks. Let's talk about the single most powerful Typal commander to ever exist.
One of the very few cards that is specifically banned in only 1v1 commander.
Yeah, it's the only the only legendary creature that's banned in 1v1.
That's not on what's it called? The
Other
regular
command
ban
list, yeah.
Crazy. He's that strong.
It's silly, man.
Eminence,
It's
man.
so silly.
So basically, whenever you cast a vampire, you get a 1/1 vampire token.
if Edgar's in your command zone or on the battlefield.
Yeah, Eminence is a very, very, very silly mechanic, and Edgar's probably the most egregious example of it, you'd have to say.
Yes, it is stupid.
Dragon is extremely powerful as well, the cost reduction, but the fact that Edgar Markov just says double all your vampires in the command zone is crazy. So yeah, the producer is what we call this. Some more examples. Mirim for dragons.
Oh yeah, it makes token copies. Yeah,
makes a token copy of stuff. I would also weirdly would call Gishath an example of a producer.
Oh, I get. Well, yeah. I mean, if you get him on battlefield and get him to swing, he's going to get you a lot of dinosaurs. They're not going to be tokens, which is usually what producers do.
Yes,
but they're still getting the Gishath is still getting you the dinosaurs.
Yeah. Look, it's not cut and dry exactly how you should build a producer deck, because I'm going to give a bit of advice and then immediately give you an example of why sometimes it's wrong. Mostly, if you're playing a producer in the command zone, as we've said already, you can have fewer of the creature type in order to make the deck work. So, Krenko, Mirim, they will double your stuff, but you can have less.
For example, Gishath
is the complete opposite.
You need a ton of dinosaurs because every time you hit, you want to flip into a ton of dinosaurs. So I get what you're saying. You really have to understand how your producer commander is producing the type.
Yes.
And then build your deck in accordance to that.
Yeah.
So is Gishath trying to cheat them out from the library? Okay, you need to stack your library, or specifically the very top full of dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So you can flip into them. Okay, Krenko's making a lot of dragons like we said before.
Yeah.
Let's make early game 1/1s and let's do that by casting one spell that makes us 3 goblins.
Yep.
I see what you're saying. Okay, I'm on board.
Just really think, I think JLK says this a lot, but really imagine when you're building a commander deck, what the ideal first 6 turns look like. You don't have to know exactly, but if you just know something like, on turn 2 I'll play ramp, on turn 3 I'll play my commander, on turn 4 I want this thing to happen, then you can plan what turn 4 should look like when you have 5 mana. And yeah, in this example, it's like, okay, I've got the producer in the command zone. So for example, Mirim, right? Mirim wants to be out first. So probably in a Mirim deck,
you don't want low to the ground dragons.
No, absolutely not.
You want big dragons so you can copy those big dragons after Mirim comes down.
Yeah, ideal first 6 turns of Mirim is probably ramp, Mirim, and then a big dragon. Right?
Yeah,
that's
that makes sense.
Dream scenario.
But a Krenko turn is turn 1, a small goblin.
Yep.
Maybe like a Skirk Prospector, something like that.
Or there's I think it's called Torch something.
Torch Carrier,
yeah.
Sacrifices
give something haste.
That's perfect on turn 1.
Krenko,
then turn 2 maybe ramp. So turn 3 you get Krenko.
Yep.
Turn 4 make more goblins, spam out a bunch of goblins, and then tap Krenko to.
Yep. Or you could build it a different way, and you could go turn 1, small goblin that does something good for the deck. Turn 2, make a couple of goblins with a Krenko's command or something. Turn 3, make more goblins. Turn 4, Krenko. Don't need to ramp, but you still need to have a plan for how those turns are going to go. Anyway, yes, that's if the producer is the type that you have your commander.
Cool.
Next one I want to highlight here. This is the one that I would say most Typal decks actually have one of these. I'm calling it the engine.
Now you've got my attention.
Yeah.
This sounds like a Typal deck that I'd want to build.
Definitely. So these are the commanders who create some sort of engine when they work in tandem with your creature type. So they usually are going to give you mana or cards. That's the way that their engine is going to work, is they're going to give you mana, which gives you more of the creature type, which gives you more mana, or they're going to give you more cards, which gives you more of the type, which gives you more cards, etc., etc.
Sure, gotcha.
So deploying these is going to actually depend on what they need in order for the engine to work. So there are some engines that want lots of creatures first, like Wilhelt.
Oh yeah,
the
zombie commander from Innistrad, the last time we went to Innistrad.
Yeah. So it basically wants to sacrifice zombies and you draw cards in your end step. You do not want to Wilhelt early because you want to be able to sacrifice some zombies when he comes out.
That makes sense. Yep.
So in that case, you want lots of early creatures, then Wilhelt. If the engine can run itself completely, then you want to deploy it early. So Marwyn for the elves would be a good example of this. Right?
Yep.
Wants to come down, make a bunch of elves, then tap it for a bunch of mana.
That makes sense.
First Sliver. For Slivers. This is the one that gives Slivers Cascade.
Oh, you want to get that down early so you can get the advantage of it, right?
Definitely.
I get you.
You don't want an empty hand and first Sliver. That's definitely a waste. And look, some of these engines are so good that they can also just be your win con. Like Kyla, Sagardian Emissary.
Oh, this is the Selesnya human Typal deck that my partner has.
Yes.
They've stopped playing that because this card can get so nutty so quickly.
Such a lightning rod because you just have to deal with it. So it's the one where when humans enter the battlefield, he gets bigger. I think
A +1 counter,
+1
I think.
counter, that's
and then
right.
humans you control get +1/+1 for each +1 counter on Kyla.
That's right.
It's nuts. Like,
is
you
nuts.
think about a type that's got support out the wazoo. Humans is definitely one of them.
Yep.
My God, and in Selesnya colors, you're spoilt for choice. Like, this is just insanity.
It's a extremely strong effect in the command zone, and that engine. So I want to highlight here that engine is so good that can be your win con.
Sure, yeah.
That might be your only win con. It's just the commander doing the thing.
Yep.
Look, most Typal decks I think run an engine in the command zone, as I said earlier, but I think what you need to know if you have an engine in the command zone is you still need enough of the essentials for the deck to work on its own. You can't rely on always having the engine operating.
And you need a direction to go. Like, for example, for Wilhelt, I think the thing is like, okay, you've got this incredible card advantage engine in the command zone with sacrifice a zombie, make a 2/2, draw a card. Like, that feels really, really good.
100%.
But okay, how's your blue-black zombie deck going to win? Are you going down to reanimate a big threat thing? Are you going down a mill everyone out thing?
Yeah.
Are you going down a overrun but in Dimir zombies? Like, I still think leveraging the good, like the really strong card advantage Typal commanders in the command zone is really good, but your deck still needs to have a point, a direction. Yeah.
You can't rely on only the commander.
Yes.
As we've said this a lot on the show, but yeah, you absolutely must have some plan for when, and not if, when the commander gets removed.
Especially if you're running commanders like Kyla, Guardian Emissary.
People can
Carter's
see how much of an
Silly.
engine they are.
Yeah.
They know to get rid of them.
And what's the last one?
The last one is kind of, look, Kyla probably bridges the gap between engine and this. The win con.
Oh, like it is just if you resolve your commander and have it do the thing once, it should win you the game.
Basically.
Sure.
Or, the win is like pointing you directly towards the commander and only the commander.
Yeah.
I think actually weirdly Dragon itself, you can play an Dragon deck that never casts the Dragon, but when you need it, it's just like, cool, pay 9 mana, draw 1,000,000 cards, drop a permanent for free. Crazy.
I see it. Like, I also run in my Elf Ball deck Abomination of Llanowar in the command zone.
Yes.
And I would consider that like more of a win con than an engine because it's only like if I get 21 elves in graveyard and on battlefield, my Abomination of Llanowar can kill someone immediately. Parent toughness equal to number of elves. So like
Vigilance and Menace too.
it's strong. It's really
gets through
good.
really well. But the thing, I guess, like, if we're looking at Abomination of Llanowar and comparing it to something like Marwyn is like working directly with the elves, right? Where it's like, the more elves that I get cast, the more I can buff.
Whereas Abomination is more like leveraging the fact that you're playing elves to get you to a win.
Abomination is not doing anything for the elves.
No.
Abomination is like the win con for all the elves you already have. Comes out super late.
I'm just thinking about the arts on the cards, and it makes so much sense. Like, Marwyn's this like nurturing mother, and then Abomination of Llanowar is literally a ball of elves. It doesn't give a fuck about the fact you're playing elves. It'll just scoop them up and roll over your creatures and kill you on the other side of the table.
The flavor text is horrifying. Isn't it like one of the mouths said run and the other mouth says come or something?
It is a gruesome art. But
Absolutely disgusting.
I played it at a pre-release and loved it.
Yep. Azuri, Renegade Leader, would be another elf commander that I would call the win con. This
Makes
just
sense.
Has overrun in it. You just pay 2 green, and it does overrun.
This just means that you can play less of the win con cards in the 99.
Yes.
So, like, for a lot of creature Typal decks, especially if you're in green, good old overrun effect or an overwhelming stampede.
Yep.
Those are great wins. And, like, look, even in Abomination of Llanowar, you could still run an overwhelming stampede because you could give all those little elves as much power as Abomination.
It's weirdly really great in Abomination of Llanowar, overwhelming stampede. Better than it normally is.
Yes,
which is already great.
But, like, you don't need tons because you're really trying to kill people through that commander punching.
So you can kind of think about, like, we've got a deck building guide and we're going to go into it in the second half. But I want to be really clear at the top of the episode here that know what your commander is doing because it'll let you know which stuff you can have less of when you're building the rest of the deck. So yeah,
I gotcha.
Exactly what you said. If your commander is the win con, you can have less win cons in the deck. But if your commander is the engine, especially if they're a drawing engine,
you can put less card draw in the deck.
Play a bit less card draw in there, or a bit less ramp in a Marwyn deck maybe. Although if you're not playing elves in a Marwyn deck, you're making a mistake.
What are you playing in your Marwyn deck if you're not playing elves?
That's so funny you should ask me. It's changelings. It's a scarecrow deck.
Surprise! Look, you said top of the
scarecrows all
episode,
along.
but I've just looked at the clock. We've actually been talking for nearly 40 minutes already.
It's been a while. I reckon it might be time for a thrifty interlude.
It's a thrifty interlude. It's like going to the op shop. You know, you go in there just like to see if there's any bargains, and then you walk past and you on the other side, you're at the counter and you've spent like $30, but walking out with a whole new wardrobe for 20 cents.
I'm gonna pop some tags.
Only got $20 in my pocket.
Dude, can we get demonetized on a podcast? I don't even know.
I don't think so. We're fine.
We only sang like 10 seconds. We're good. We're going to take a thrifty interlude. So there's lots to talk about, including the essentials of building a Typal deck, all of the cards that you're going to need and how you're going to need them. Before that, we're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. And as is tradition, I will be performing a monologue. And this week, the card is brought to life from the perspective of someone in the card. James, you want to read the card I'm featuring this week?
I always get creeped out when you say it's by someone in the card, because then I have to look at the art and go,
Is it
who
you?
is it? Who
Is it
gonna
you?
be? Well, this week's thrifty interlude is Hallowed Spirit Keeper. For 1 white and a white, you'll get a creature avatar 3/2 with vigilance. And when it dies... I see why you chose this card now. When it dies, you create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard.
Hello. I wave my 4 fingers at you, sir, for I bid you welcome to the temple. You can see we have a fine collection of white stones arrayed in tall stacks which form the walls. You are also welcome to the narrow lines of cut marble and, more importantly, to the openings they create, the windows. If you are feeling particularly ostentatious on this lovely spring day, you may indulge in the pleasures of standing in place and dwelling within your thought cave, the mind, as it slows and, as you feel the holy light, becomes serene. One day, perhaps, if you were to worship here every day, you may find yourself in a position such as I, in fine white garb, possessing this purely ornamental halberd, and waving your 4 fingers at the neighbourhood cats as they urinate on your shoes. You may not intervene with the course of nature as it unfolds on your sacred boots. Simply enjoy the warm sensation as your potent cat allergy brings about your death. Get budgeted!
Hello, Spirit Keeper gives me real strong vibes of the Taylor from Kath and Kim.
I see it.
It's that kind of like 45-year-old gay man in the northeastern suburbs or like eastern suburbs of
Slightly
Melbourne.
pompous gay man.
Yeah.
100%.
And if you have no idea what Kath and Kim is, please, for the love of God, do yourself a favor and watch Kath and Kim.
Especially if you're from the States, watch some highlight videos. It's like it's a pretty authentic look at like white suburban life in Melbourne, to be honest, which is where me and James live. So if you want to know more about us, Kath and Kim's the way to get there.
Yeah, that's like just our parents.
Yes,
like
definitely. If you enjoyed that, you can see these every Thursday in text form when they're released in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server in the Thrifty Thursdays channel that's linked in the show notes.
I say that, but my parents are from the UK.
Oh, true. You've got some very different
Maybe
stats.
watch Catherine Tate for my parents, then you get that idea. Right, should we jump back in?
Let's jump back in.
We have to go through the essentials of deck building now, right?
We absolutely do. So this is all now referring back to our deck building template, which we shared in episode 37, but we've referred to a bunch in this episode. It hasn't changed since then. We have the same guidelines that we used back then of how many of each of these things you need. But we're going to sort of tailor them specifically to if you're building a Typal deck, what you might actually sort of want to choose from.
Are we going to tailor them?
I didn't mean that. Very good.
I know you didn't.
Very well done.
Got ya. Okay.
Starting with, I think, the most important part of any deck besides the lands. Card draw.
Yeah, every deck needs card draw. Every day. Sometimes if you're playing against some players and they go, why do I always end up with no cards in hand?
Yep.
How many pieces of friggin' card draw are you running?
It's so important and people are underplaying it still. We recommend these days, I think we're at the 15 mark, right?
Yep, I would be...
Do not go under 15.
I still for some decks, if my card draw is really, really good and very efficient and repeatable, I can go closer to 10.
Yep, I have done that too.
I will usually start my deck building process with 15 pieces in the deck, so I can go, right, now if I need to start looking for cuts, I can remove the bad card draw.
And equally, I have decks that go way higher than this if the card draw is not very good. So for instance, I'm brewing, might be a little bit of a spoiler, I'm brewing a Gandalf the White deck. James has seen an early edition of this deck already.
Yeah, more specifically, we were brewing this in the hotel room.
When we were at CanCon.
CanCon.
Yeah. And this deck has like 24 bits of card draw or something.
Seriously?
Yeah. Well, pretty much all the card draw is like an artifact that enters the battlefield and draws you a card.
Which will double with Gandalf.
Which is drawing 2, but admittedly, there's like almost no cards in the deck that can ever draw more than 1 card at a time.
Okay.
So really, like, you kind of need that 25-ish level if
Just
that's
to
what
keep your hand filled.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, I see it.
But look, we're building a Typal deck. So I would say most Typal decks are going to benefit from these sorts of card draw that care about going wide.
Yeah.
There's some pieces that are specific to Typal decks here that we'll highlight first. Like Distant Melody.
Distant Melody was the one that my mind immediately went to. This is the 4-mana
green
blue
and
spell
blue. Yep.
that draws a card for each. You choose a creature type, and you draw a card for each creature type of that type you control.
Yeah. It's actually permanent type. So sometimes when you have one of those
elf enchantments
or whatever,
Heck yeah.
you can draw one more. But yeah, mostly you're just going to go, okay, I've got 10 elves, I'll draw 10 cards, which is great for 4 mana.
Is whack, yeah.
If you're going wide. Kindred Discovery, great for a similar reason. This is the 5-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature you choose a creature type, whenever a creature of that type ETBs or attacks, draw a card. So this is amazing in like your Fey decks. What else in blue would really want a Kindred? Probably...
There's like, I can see fairies being
Definitely
like one that I really like. Rogues also might be a
Rogues
big one on
is a
this
great
one.
one, actually.
Just because like your rogues tend to really want to attack.
And they tend to be difficult to block, so you're going to want to attack with them a lot of the time.
Yep,
yeah,
rogues.
those sorts of small and easy to attack with. Any sort of flying, actually. If you're on like drakes, you know, or spirits,
building
even.
a Talran Drake typal deck.
Yeah, or
sure.
spirits, or any number of flyers. I think this is especially good.
Yeah.
I want to highlight a card that they desperately need to reprint. Don't recommend buying it right now for the price, but hopefully when it reprints, it'll be cheaper. Species Specialist.
Oh, this one got a printing in the human type deck in the Ikoria precons?
Yeah, Commander 2020. It hasn't been reprinted since then, and that's the only printing of it, so it's like $15 now.
That's wild.
It's really good though. So it's a 4-mana creature. It ETBs, bless you, ETBs, and you choose a creature type, and whenever a creature of that type dies, you may draw a card. So
that's so strong.
Obviously, the best place to use
does it say whenever a creature dies, not non-token creature?
I think it's just a creature of the type, but I'm going to check
creature
Skyfall.
of the type.
I'm pretty sure it just says if a creature of that type dies.
Because that's incredibly strong. Because again, we're thinking about card draw that's specifically really good in decks that are going wide, like your elf decks, your goblin decks, those kinds of things. Is it
would hit tokens as well? Whenever a creature of the chosen type dies, you may draw a card.
That's unbelievable. I can see why it's $15.
Yeah. The cool thing you can do here as well, it doesn't say it has to be your creatures. So if you're
No
playing
way.
against a Typal deck and you know that like your deck's Typal deck, I think you should only put this in a Typal deck.
Yeah.
But let's say your type's not really going well, you've got an empty hand, and someone's on, I don't know, like elves.
And you board wipe.
And you're about to board wipe. Be like, species specialist, name elf, board wipe, draw 20 cards.
That's unbelievably cool. Oh,
really
man,
sweet.
I really like this card.
It's
I think
sick.
I sold mine ages ago.
sad.
And I'm now really, really hot on this. This is sick. I also love the art. The art on the card.
The art is great.
Dope.
Looks very Grim Reaper looking.
Yeah.
I also really like Vanquish's Banner here. I don't play this in any of my decks, but it's rarely a bad time. It's a 5-mana artifact. You choose a creature type. Creatures of that type get +1/+1, which is fine. But whenever you cast a creature of that type, draw a card.
So it basically turns every creature that you have in your deck into a cantrip.
Yep. It replaces itself in your hand. It's
is
great.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Especially in decks. I think elf decks love this a lot.
Especially when you can just go chaining like late game mana dorks. You can go right, and especially if you combine that with like a Beast Whisperer effect, like you're now drawing 2 cards every creature type.
Yeah,
that's really good.
I think this card gets better the worse the rest of your card draw is.
Yeah.
So like white loves this card a lot because if you're playing angels, for instance.
Yep.
Vanquish's
drawing
Banner,
cards in mono white is pretty
replacing
tricky.
yourself a card in your hand every time you cast an angel is great.
I do want to shout out one specific piece of equipment that goes in nearly any Typal deck.
Yeah.
If the creatures are small enough. Skull Clamp.
Oh, yeah.
This is like... I mean,
amazing.
if you're playing elves, if you're playing goblins,
Yeah.
anything that your type typically has 1 toughness,
Yeah.
throw a Skull Clamp in there.
Chuck
You
it in a
will not
Merfolk
be
deck.
disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, chuck it. Actually, Merfolk.
Although Merfolk have a lot of lords, which can kind of work against you, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, they're all 2/2s now. Can't clamp any of them. But yeah, generally speaking, if you're pooping out 1/1s, you will enjoy a Skull Clamp. A human's deck, for instance, will really enjoy a Skull
really
Clamp.
good.
Likewise, Idol of Oblivion, if you're making tokens specifically, is going
Tap
to
it to
draw you
draw a card if you
every
make a
turn.
token, yep.
And it's worth doing a little bit of a dig, especially on EDH Rec, just to see if there might be some card draw that is specific to your type. For instance, I have a humans deck. There's a card called Mass Appeal for 2 and a blue. You just draw a card for every human you control.
2 and a blue.
Yeah. So this is
distant,
cheaper.
It's Distant Melody, but cheaper.
Than Distant Melody. So in a human's deck, you would be silly not to play that card. Because in Distant Melody, you basically want in every Typal deck. So yeah, if you're on humans, play Mass Appeal.
I'm thinking of Graveborn Muse in zombie type decks as
great
well.
thought.
That's
Yeah,
like another
100%.
one. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose X and draw X, where X the number of zombies.
There would be some in most types, I would say. Probably not white. But if your type contains, it's definitely green or black and definitely blue, it's probably got a spell that cares about it.
Most
out
likely.
There.
All right, so what about the decks that are like different to going wide or...
Like going tall, I
Yeah.
would probably say, because you're caring about creatures if you're building Typal. So if you're not going wide, you're probably going tall. I would say you probably want, your usual stuff like Garruk's Uprising, Elemental Bond.
Oh, well, that's beneficial as well. Garruk's Uprising gives trample,
Yes.
so if you're going tall, it helps you get that damage over.
Yep, but most of all, like this is great in dragons and all these big creatures that are always going to replace themselves in your hand with an Elemental Bond or a Garruk's Uprising. Great spot for those. And then I'm still super hot on all of the green card draw spells that care about the power of a creature you control.
Yep.
Return of the Wild Speaker has the upside of being a win con late in the game. Rishkar's Expertise lets you cast a spell for free. There's a bunch more that we can list off, but any of those cards that say draw cards equal the greatest power or whatever, if you're on dragons, especially if your commander is like a 6/6 dragon or a 7/7 dragon, this is always going to draw you 7 cards.
And if you're in green here, that's the gas. There is a
Definitely.
couple of really good, like if you're not in green and you care about going tall, there's a couple of really good black spells that, sacrifice a creature as an additional cost and you draw those cards.
Yep.
So if you're going tall, those kind of card draw effects, I think, that's the card I'm trying to think of. Disciple of Bolus is the card.
Oh.
Where it ETBs and you sack a creature and you gain X and draw X for X its power.
Four mana creature.
Yeah,
Yep,
4 mana creature.
That's right. I'm just going to chase down this one card that just popped into my head because I'm brewing the ooze thing.
Slime against
Slime
humanity.
against humanity. I've brewed an ooze deck.
Are you counting that towards your 11?
I don't know if I included it in the count because I haven't built it yet. I
Okay.
have a draft and the draft is quite good.
We did play it on Discord. We just were in the Moxfield playtest area the other night.
Yeah.
Walt and I, and we play tested it. This Slime Against Humanity's card is so
It's
weird.
so silly
It's
and I love it
weird.
so much.
You struggling to find something?
Hold on, I think I got it.
Walt's got like a string of
I'm doing my
Oracle
My best
syntax.
Scryfall search here.
Oh.
Pact of the Serpent.
What's Pact of the
This
Serpent?
has been only, I think it came out in Kaldheim Commander, so it's a fairly new card. 1 black, you choose a creature type. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of creatures they control of the chosen type.
Oh, so you could... the fact that it says target player makes me really want to kill
I know,
someone with this
you
card.
could kill someone with this card, which is kind of funny if they were also on Typal. I guess black is kind of good at this, right?
Yeah.
Species Specialist and Pact of the Serpent.
Fair enough.
Very cool. I do want to talk about a couple of card draw pieces that I think are played too much. I'm not saying that they should never go in a deck, but I'm saying they should be right at the bottom of your list when you're choosing card draw. Herald's Horn, I really am not crazy about. This is the one, it does reduce the cost of casting the creature type that you choose.
It's the one that reveals at the beginning of your upkeep.
You can reveal it. So you look at the top card of your library in your upkeep and you can reveal it. And if it's a creature that shares a type, that is the type that you chose, the Herald's Horn, you put it in your hand.
Right.
Otherwise, nothing happens.
So this is better if you're slam packing your deck with the type of creature.
Yeah.
But even then, like what would we say? Like 30 is like a really good number.
But even then, it's only drawing you a card.
Well, that's
30%
what I was
of the time.
thinking. Like
the
it's
thing.
a third of your deck, so it's
Yeah.
only drawing you an extra. And how much is it to cast?
It's a 3 mana artifact. So look, if you really want the reduction, maybe it's worth it. And you're on 30 creatures at least, then I think maybe. But also, so many creature types have a creature of the type that says goblin spells you cast cost 1 less, or merfolk spells you cast cost 1
Yeah.
less, or wizard spells, or like every creature has something that reduces the cost.
And usually also has like a makes more of the creature or gets
Yeah.
you more cards in hand, its
Or-
card advantage in of itself.
At the very least, that creature is also a merfolk or a goblin.
Yeah,
so that
if you put
counts
Herald's Horn
towards
in,
that count.
yeah,
know?
if you put Herald's Horn in, that's one less goblin that Kranko could make like
Yeah.
a token for.
Straight up.
Yeah.
So look, I'm not saying never play it, but I'm saying like put this way down your list of card draw because it's going to draw you a card maximum about 35% of the time.
Sure.
Also, Icon of Ancestry, similar problem. 3 mana artifact. It buffs your creatures of a chosen type by 1. And then you can pay 3 and tap it, and you look at the top 3 cards of your library, and you can reveal a creature of the chosen type and put it into your hand. So
Yeah, maybe drawing, maybe not.
we're
Yeah,
talking
okay.
about a 6 mana card, 6 mana to maybe draw 1 creature.
Yeah, it's not
I don't
gonna be
know.
good.
I don't
and
think
like
it's
a buff
that
is
good.
nice, but like it's again, you've got things like Lord of Atlantis.
Yes,
and, like,
exactly.
yeah.
You could have it on a creature
Yeah.
instead. Yeah, that's the big problem.
Lord of
with those
Atlantis
cards.
might be a bit expensive if you're building Merfolk. Isn't
Yeah,
that like the
it's
reserve
kind of
list
crept
one?
up a little. I don't think it's reserve list, but it's like $4 or $5.
There's a reserve list Merfolk that
Is there?
is like a +1/+1 and Island Walk maybe, and
That's
that's
Lord of
like
Atlantis.
is that Lord of Atlantis?
I don't think it's because I had that in 7th edition. I don't
Oh,
think that's...
okay.
Anyway, it's expensive though.
There you go.
They're a great card if you can get it in there. Ramp.
Oh yeah, second
Let's talk about
essential.
ramp. Yeah.
Yep, this is probably the next one where a minimum is usually recommended. We usually recommend a minimum of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can go even lower than this if your curve can allow it.
Yeah.
But especially if you're building things like dragons.
Oh yeah.
Dragons have a ridiculously high mana curve, so you'll probably want to go 15 ramp.
Yeah.
I think this is again. We've done a mana curve episode which I highly recommend you go listen to.
Mana curvy, it's called.
Yeah, it's a good one. But I think with ramp, you need to think about what the average mana cost of the creature type that you're wanting to slam is. Like dragons, always going to be high. Elves,
Almost exclusively low.
really, most of them are 1 to 3 drops.
Yeah.
But the thing that elves are really good at is ramping. They're all mana dorks, so maybe you're looking at like you don't need to think about ramp as much because 10 pieces of ramp are 10 elves that tap for a green.
Yeah.
I can think of 5 like off the top of my
Yeah.
head that tap for mana.
But then it's so funny because you have to balance what your curve is, but also what your deck wants to do.
Yeah.
So like with elves, it's true. Your curve's going to be low, and your dorks are very efficient.
But what's your
also,
top end?
Yeah, you might be playing a Torment of Hailfire as your win con.
Yep.
You might want a ton of ramp. Maybe your card draw is like 8 mana sorceries and stuff.
Fair.
You
Yeah,
might,
okay.
be playing In Garrick's Wake as your board wipe. Like, you might need all that mana to justify it, in which case, maybe elves will want to go higher than that. Goblins probably are going to want less than 10.
Yep.
Not by much, though. Maybe like 9 or 8 or something. But even then, there's goblins that ramp you, so you might want to put those in as well. Otherwise, I actually don't think there's that much that we need to talk about in terms of ramp. I think you basically just need to think about whether, and then this applies to just picking ramp pieces in general, does your deck want to ramp a particular way?
Yeah. So like for example, like in your golems deck,
Yeah.
big fan of artifacts.
It's artifacts. It's so funny. I remember the first version of the deck I built, I was like, I'm just going to play rampant growth and cultivate and all these land things because they're so efficient and no one ever blows up lands. It's like, that's true, but also you're playing an artifact deck.
So maybe you do want a thought vessel or a
and
talisman.
signet, and yeah, it's actually kind of important. And then like from the inverse, my humans deck cares about giving spells flashback.
So you can give like rampant growth and
Yes.
Farseek and stuff flashback.
I play every 2 mana ramp spell that I'm aware of. That's like a spell that says
Yep.
gets a land out of your hand, out of your library, and puts it into the battlefield. Because it's just like so good to
Yep.
flash that back. But if they don't want to ramp a particular way, just do the usual thing that we recommended in our deck building template. If it doesn't matter how you ramp, just do lands, right?
Yep, lands is
And
always
then-
good, especially if you're in green. Just
you're
run
in
your
green.
typical land ramp package. Yep.
Yep, ramp, growth, farseek, all the usual stuff. And then otherwise, you can just play signets, talismans, other 2 mana ramp, right?
Yep.
I think the only other thing we should talk about here on ramp, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. Creatures that have a type that reduces the cost of it. Like
Now-
we mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, see, I'm super hot on mana reducers as ramp.
Right, okay.
I've recently discovered mana reducers can be more effective at giving you mana advantage than a ramp spell, whether it's a mana rock, a mana dork, or a Farseek.
They can be. I mean, like, I'll give an example from my Vevictus deck. I'm playing Goblin and Archomancer.
Yeah, that makes red and green spells cost 1 less,
Yeah, red
right?
and green
Yep.
spells cost 1 less, and it's for a green and a red. So yeah, like, over the course of a turn...
This is exactly what I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
saying like, okay, if you cast a 2 mana mana rock. Let's say you cast an
Arcane
Arcane Signet.
Yeah.
On a turn, you will tap that and you will use its resource and it's done you well.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're playing Goblin and Archimancer, on your turn, you could cast 3 spells that have all been discounted by 1. So technically that 2 mana ramp spell has saved you 3 mana in the long run.
Yeah.
So I'm really hot on mana reducers.
Yeah.
I was really stoked when Commander Masters reprinted the Sapphires, not the sapphires, the medallions.
Medallions.
Yeah, sapphire medallion, pearl medallion, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think they're sick. I don't think you want to run a ton of these.
No.
I think especially because usually they're stapled to creatures. Creatures are likely to be removed.
Yep.
And just die as a casualty. So yeah, you don't want to be going all in on mana reducers unless you're trying to pull off some wild combo thing where you need it to be reduced by 3. But I'm really hot on mana reducers. I really like them.
Yeah, look, I like them a lot. I think that the thing you got to evaluate when you're putting them in a deck is just how much of your deck it's reducing. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you're on one of those super high creature count Typal decks, like my Goblin deck, for instance, I play Goblin Warchief. Makes Goblins cost 1 less. It also gives them haste. So it's extremely good already just with that line of text. But, yeah, there's like 25, or, what did I say? 34 creatures, Goblins in the deck. It's reducing the cost of 34 cards in my deck.
Because, an Arcane Signet can help you cast any spell, but a Goblin Reducer can't help you cast that artifact or a Torment of Hailfire or anything else like that.
Well, an Arcane Signet can help you cast a Goblin Warchief, but a Goblin Warchief can't help you cast an Arcane Signet.
It's like all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs.
Very good.
Yeah.
We were all thinking it.
But you could look at probably an automatic include for a lot of Typal decks is Urza's Incubator.
Oh, yeah.
This is when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, so it's not even linked to a specific creature type. And it reduces it by 2.
Yeah, it's a 3 mana artifact as well. So you
It's
probably
kind of wild.
detected a little bit of a pattern here in terms of like how much mana it usually costs to get a reduction. Some creature types will have a 2 mana creature that reduces by 1. A lot of them have 3 mana creatures that reduce by 1. And then basically every artifact that we've highlighted does it. It's a 3 mana artifact reduces by 1. And even if you find what's the Cloud Key ETB, you choose a card type, reduces that by 1. Like that's the effect. That's how much it normally costs. The reason this Incubator is so expensive is the 3 mana artifact that reduces by 2.
Yeah, it's cracked, and especially if you're in a deck where you are trying to cheat out some massive like high curve stuff. I actually really like reduces like this. Like in a dinosaur deck or in a dragon deck, I'm actually really like for like Urza's Incubator effects. Like, I mean, you look at cards like Dragon, it's a mana reducer in the command zone. So if you put another one, you're enhancing the deck a little bit. I think they're really good. I really like them.
I think probably the 2 questions you need to ask is how many things that is it reducing, which I said before, but also how good is a reduction? And how much can you reduce before it's a point of diminishing return? So yeah, dragons and dinosaurs, reducing the cost of those feels great.
Because usually dinosaurs are like, look at like Apex Altasaur. It's like 8 and a green.
Yeah.
Like reducing that by 4. Wow, you're cooking with gas.
Yeah. Whereas my Goblin deck, I think Goblin Warchief is my only cost reducer. Because
at a certain point, you can reduce goblins by 5, but no goblin costs more than 5.
And mostly they have lots of red pips is the other thing. So like reducing,
that's true.
Sometimes I have Goblin Warchief out and it's like I have a handful of like
red goblins.
Cost red, cost red black, costs red black. And it's like none of these are reduced at all.
Fair enough.
So yeah, you got to think about that point of diminishing returns for sure. But I agree, they can be very good, and in the right decks they can be absolutely amazing. Removal is the next one that we talk about. Specifically, we have targeted removal and board wipes. We separate these out. That's just how we like to do things. Targeted removal, we recommend 8 to 10.
Yep.
Look, we can speed run through this. If you can find something in your type that wants to do it, then you can include it.
Yeah. Like if you're, I don't know, you've got a Chupacabra deck, put Ravenous Chupacabra in there.
But like goblins, for instance, are quite good at dealing with artifacts. Goblin Trashmaster, sack a goblin, destroy an artifact. Play that as your artifact removal. Absolutely, do that.
There are zombies that like can come in and exploit and destroy target creature. Like that's really good in a zombie type deck.
But otherwise, you can refer to the advice we gave in the best removal episode, episode 32. Basically, play the removal that synergizes with your deck. So if you're playing a deck that cares at all about enter the battlefield effects, like my Vevictus deck, I play Reclamation Sage. I also play Acidic Slime because they're really good cards to flip off off the top. If you need to have lots of artifacts in your deck, maybe it's worth having a Spine of Ishtar as your removal spell. I don't know.
That's pretty bonkers.
Live your
Maybe what's the Dispeller's Capsule?
Oh, Dispeller's Capsule.
That's a really
Yep.
good one if
Especially
you're in
if you're bringing
artifact
stuff back from the graveyard. Yep. Really, really good there. But otherwise, yeah. If you got it in the type, 100% play the stuff that's in your type. Oh, I should highlight, because I played in my humans deck, and it can be really good in the right deck. What's it called? The 3-mana spell that exiles a creature and they make a changeling.
Oh, Crib Swap.
Crib Swap.
So
Crib Swap is an instant, but
so silly.
The spell has changeling. So if you have a deck that cares at all about
when you cast
a human, cast a merfolk, cast a whatever, play this card because it will count as casting a merfolk and casting a goblin and casting a scarecrow.
It also counts in your graveyard. It will still be a elf or a human in your graveyard. It's really, really bizarre how those like Typal instant, Typal sorceries, Typal enchantments work.
Strange.
But board wipes. Yes. This is the category where like Typal decks usually get some like benefit from like going all in on Typals. There's usually like a board wipe or two in any specific type that is like pretty one-sided.
Absolutely. And there's some that can go in any creature type. I think it's worth saying, so we recommend 1 to 5 board wipes in our guide.
Yeah.
I think Typal decks are going to be towards the bottom end of that scale.
Just because you're going all in on creatures.
You're going all in on creatures. Like there's exceptions. If you're playing zombies, you know, you might be able to reanimate your whole thing, whatever. But most of the time, 1 to 2 board wipes is going to be right.
But I also think that like you could go up on board wipes if you find all these incredible ones that I was referring to that are like all one-sided. Like Olivia's Wrath is like completely like deal damage equal to deal damage to all non-vampires. Destroy all non-something. Like all non-elf creatures get -4/-4 eye blight ending.
Yeah.
Like all these cards are like so good. And if you're in a Typal deck that is that type, why not just run a couple more?
Yeah, I guess you could go higher because they're never hitting you.
Yeah.
I mean, Kindred Dominance is like probably the absolute top of this scale here. This is the 7-mana sorcery. You choose a creature type, destroy all creatures that aren't of the chosen type.
Yeah.
You can put this in any Typal deck, and it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I do think that, like, sometimes I've found when you choose a creature type, especially a creature type that's common just in other decks, like if you're on humans or if you're on elves, it's very common that you'll come up against another deck that might not be playing into the Typal strategy,
but has some of them in the deck.
And a 7-mana board wipe that doesn't completely do a one-sided board wipe can feel a little bit bad.
It can. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Like,
I mean, look,
certainly if you're on vampires, it's pretty rare that someone else will be on vampires, unless, very rarely you'll be able to get in a Typal matchup. I like Crippling Fear as well.
Oh, yeah.
This is a 4-mana Wrath that you choose a creature type. Every creature that isn't the chosen type gets -3/-3 until end of turn. That'll kill a good chunk of the board most of the time.
It's surprising how often just a 3 damage to all creatures can do.
Yeah. I mean, look, Volcanic Torrent. We're not talking Typal anymore for a sec here. But Volcanic Torrent, me and James are extremely high on because you cast one spell and then cast Volcanic Torrent. Everything your opponents control takes 3 damage, and you've cast the spell for free from Volcanic Torrent. It's extremely good.
There are decks where Volcanic Torrent is not that good, but there are so many decks where it's like playable and playable enough that it's very fun and very powerful.
I like it a lot in Typal decks because most of the time, especially if you're on a small creature type.
If you're on a low curve, it's actually nuts. Because like if you go, like you're in a Gruul elf deck. Yeah. You go elf, Volcanic Torrent. Everything takes elf, Cascade, Volcanic. 5? Everything takes 5?
That feels pretty good. I mean, also just like, you could be playing a wipe that deals 2 damage to everything, but if you're on Wizards, it's going to kill your whole board.
Yeah.
Whereas Volcanic Torrent is always your opponent's, I guess is the appeal that I see. I want to highlight a card I've just put in my humans deck from the Doctor Who Commander decks. Everything Comes to Dust.
Oh, this is the scene at the end of season 1 of Doctor Who New Who, and Rose is like absorbed the time vortex and she's blowing up every Dalek inside.
I am life. I give life.
I give life. I bring death and I give life.
There you go.
That's the quote.
7 white, so it's 10, but it has Convoke, and you exile all artifacts, enchantments, and creatures that didn't share a type with something that convoked the spell.
Oh, I forget about that line.
Artifacts and enchantments?
No. I forget about the line that it protects your own stuff.
Yeah,
I thought you were just shouting this out generally, but this is like a really good typal include.
If you're on humans, if you're on elves or whatever, you just tap, you convoke it out with all your elves, all your humans or whatever. It's going to exile every non-human or every non-elf and all artifacts and all enchantments. You just keep everything. I mean, look, it'll blow up artifacts and enchantments, so I wouldn't recommend it in a deck that cares about those. But if you don't, holy cow.
This feels like a really sick soldier board wipe. I don't know why that soldiers is giving me a strong thing with this card. I feel like it's the fact that she's like this warrior coming out.
I like it. I like it for sure. Otherwise, I would just say refer to the removal episode.
Yep.
Right? We recommended how we choose board wipes. We like modality. We like efficiency and mana cost. So look for those new board wipes.
Protection, probably the
Yes.
next one. We usually go around the 5 to 10 mark, depending on how fragile your deck is.
Yep.
Protection's one of those things that can either protect your life total, protect the combo, protect your board state.
Yep.
Every deck should have some kind of effect of keeping itself safe, whether it's ward, hexproof, that kind of stuff. I always love putting, like, especially if my commander is like, Abomination of Llanowar, stuff like Swiftfoot Boots.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff protects the commander as the win con.
I think in terms of protection for a Typal deck, I reckon I would recommend... I do think that stuff's really good, especially if your commander is like a real lightning rod. Absolutely play that. But I think the most important protection pieces that you're going to include... The thing is, if you're going wide or if you're going tall, the main way people are going to answer your board is with a board wipe, not necessarily with targeted removal.
Yeah, usually it's like, oh my god, the Goblin deck is going so wide, we have to find a board wipe now.
Yeah, it's like I can't cast a targeted removal spell on all 20 of these creatures, right?
Yeah.
Like,
let me cast a Swords to Plowshares on that 1/1 Goblin there. Enjoy your one life.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in general, you're going to want to be chasing Indestructible if you can. Obviously, not every color has this, but certainly if you're on white, play your Unbreakable formation. Play your Rootborn Defenses. This is the one that populates as well. And if you have the money and power is not a problem for you, Flawless Maneuver is the free one if you control your commander.
I play it in my Savine deck.
It's been very strong in
very
there when I've
strong.
seen it as well.
I also guess like Patriarch Spitting in your Goblins deck, the story that we just told, that's like a mass reanimation spell, but can be like a way to protect your board, because like if you do get board wiped, you can go, okay, well, next turn I Patriarch Spitting, and now it's all okay again.
Straight up. No, definitely, it's a 100% valid way to protect the board. It's just be like, okay, you can get rid of it, I'll bring it back. I think if you're not in white, so you can't do mass protection, you're not in black, so you can't do reanimation. If you are in blue, this is a rare circumstance where I will recommend counterspells. I just think it's like my Kaza Wizards deck, for instance. I was looking at spells and I was like, surely there's a spell in blue or red that like gives my creatures indestructible.
No,
it's
just
like
freaking counter the spell on the way down.
You just
Walt.
have to counterspell it. And honestly, if you're in blue and not white or black, it's your most valid way to protect your board.
I mean, there are some like counterspells that are thematical enough that people are like, yeah, no, that's cool. Like Wizard's Retort is a 1 blue and a blue for a counterspell that costs 1 less if you control a wizard. Like,
so if you have a wizard deck,
counterspell.
It's just counterspell, but it's funnier.
Yeah, you could run counterspell, but Wizard's Retort.
Why run counterspell?
That's flavor.
I like Sublime Epiphany in my Kaza Wizards deck a lot.
Oh, well, that reduces
counterspell with upside.
Counterspell with insane upside. Yeah, whack.
Otherwise, refer to our usual advice from the deck building template around protection and what you need from it.
All right, I think the last thing that any good deck needs, regardless of if it's Typal, anything, is a good, solid win con.
Yes.
What are we... Because, like, Typal decks have... Like we said, there's, like, the engine deck, there's the go wide, go tall. So, like, we've talked about, like, the go wide, go tall win cons, but... Yeah, help me out here. What are we recommending here?
There's so many things you can do, and it will depend so much on your type. I actually want to start this section by calling out something I think you should not do.
Sure.
Which is play Arcane Adaptation and Maskwood Nexus. So these are both cards that give your creatures... You choose a creature type, and every creature is that type in addition to its other types.
These are really good in Typal builds,
Yes.
which is what we were talking about earlier. These are the decks that are, like, going all in on the fact that they can run multiple different lords because they're going all in on this all creatures are all types because then you can tap 5. You can tap a goblin, a vampire, ooze, and everything else to captivating vampire because they're all also vampires.
Yeah. So in that deck, these are great. And I'm absolutely not contesting that whatsoever. They're also really great in if you're playing a creature type where there's literally just not enough good creatures of that type that you could realistically build it, like satyrs or foxes, turtles, elephants. It's going to be very hard to play a good deck that contains all those creatures, 30 of them.
Although if you are building Elephant Typal and you're not running, I think it's Mr. Peanuts from the unset, you're building it wrong. And if Generous Gift is also not in your deck,
a card called Mr. Peanuts.
I think it's either Mr. Peanuts or it's.
I hope there is.
I genuinely think
amazing. I'm looking up Peanuts.
It's an uncard. I think it was from
I believe it if it's called Mr. Peanuts.
Yeah,
Frankie Peanuts!
Frankie Peanuts!
Frankie Peanuts!
Read the card out. I actually have no idea.
My God.
Keep in mind, this is an uncard. It is a silver bordered card. It is not legal in our format. But if you do want to build Elephant Typal, I think this is the one.
2 white. Frankie Peanuts is a 2/3 legendary creature, Elephant Rogue.
Elephant Rogue.
At the beginning of your upkeep, you may ask target player a yes or no question. If you do, that player answers that question truthfully and abides by that answer if able until end of turn.
This is a politics deck. What?
The flavor text is don't cross him or you'll end up sleeping with the merfolk. Frankie Peanuts!
There you go.
He's only mono white, I guess, is probably the issue because I think there's a lot of green goblins. I feel
elephants. You mean?
Oh my God, green goblins as well.
Mine's just on the goblins.
Yeah, no, it's
But I get what you're saying. Look, these decks are, and like even in Yuriko, for example,
Yuriko's another great spot for
because Yuriko has a really weird effect where it's like you're playing unblockable creatures that usually aren't ninjas, so you can ninja in your ninja to deal the combat damage. But if you play Arcane Adaptation, your weird 1/1 unblockable salamander is now a ninja as well, so it will trigger Yuriko.
It's free Yuriko trigger every turn. Absolutely fantastic in a Yuriko deck. But in general, if you're on a Typal deck and you just care about having lots of creatures of the type, like goblins, like dragons, like most of the ones that we've highlighted today, I don't think you need an Arcane Adaptation or a Master Nexus because your creatures are already that type. You know what I mean? Like, you got to think about how many creatures you're turning into that type for it to be worth it. So yeah, Typal decks, you're turning everything into that type that wasn't that type before. In a Yuriko deck, you're turning half of the creatures that aren't ninjas into ninjas. That's really good.
I'd say like if you're about 50% not the type that you want to be, then you can run these kind of effects.
I agree. And even 60% maybe, but certainly if you've got 35 goblins and then 5 other creatures in your deck, don't run these cards.
And I guess that kind of in the context of win cons or enhancers, that's kind of, if you're in that caliber of 50%, this is pushing you towards your win. So this is why we're including it in this section, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we'd be remiss not to talk about Roaming Throne.
Oh, is this... I've heard that this is a really unknown card that is like really slept on and no one spoke about it at all at the end of last year.
Admittedly, we had played a lot when this happened, but we were at CanCon and we finished a game and... It was funny because we were both really tired and I had a really good laugh thinking about it later. But someone was like, we finished a game and James, what deck were you playing? You were playing like a Typal deck of some kind.
I think it might have been...
Or it just had like a great commander.
I can't remember what deck. Anyway, someone
was just like, hey, have you thought about Roaming Throne in that deck? And James was just like, yeah. And every other deck that I own. It's a great card. I don't want to play it. It's extremely boring. And I was just like, whoa. James has had enough.
I apologize for how I came off in that conversation.
But it is a bit like that. People are like, guys, have you heard of this gas new card called Roaming Throne? And it's like, everywhere and everywhere that I go.
But like, yes, I see what you're saying. In terms of like trying to get maybe it's a really niche type that's like, maybe you're trying to play Kithkin or something like that. I don't know, like really, really like struggling to build this really weird niche type. Roaming Throne can be the Panharmonicon, the enhancer in your deck that gets you over the line. And if you're playing it in a deck like that, I'm like super fine with you doing that.
It's just this sort of mentality people have of like, it goes in every deck and therefore I will put one in every deck. It's just like, don't constrain your deck building like that. It's boring. But certainly, yes, if you have a commander with a triggered ability and you're building Typal, my dream if I don't disassemble this deck before then, is if I ever get a Roaming Throne, I want to put it in my Selesnya Artifacts deck because
Whoa,
Roaming
that's
Throne
big.
becomes the type in addition to its other types, and it is a golem. So what you can do is you can cast it. It's a golem already, and you name Artificer.
No.
And every
that's-
single time my commander triggers when an artifact hits the bin, or an Artificer ETBs that makes golems, it happens twice. And it's a golem, so every time I sacrifice an artifact, it triggers twice and gets twice that many counters put on it.
You've convinced me. I
This is the
like
place
Roaming
for it.
Throne. Roaming Throne has a home, and it's in Walt's Ishtakik Golem Typal deck.
It's a strange deck.
Stupid.
We should talk about some actual win cons and not just rag at cards we don't like. Lords are definitely a way you can get over the line. Lords
Yep.
is like a general term we use for any creature that gives other creatures of a type +1/+1, because they were originally called Lords. Lord of Atlantis, Goblin Lord, these
Yep.
kinds of things.
Lord
If
of
you-
the Forest or something like that.
Yeah, if you play enough of them, the creatures get big enough that you can just win that way.
Yeah.
That said, some types don't really need them. I think dragons are big enough. For instance, like if you have like a dragon that's like dragons get +1/+1, I wouldn't really play that. Especially if I could instead have like Ataka that I highlighted earlier that
Yeah.
gives dragons double strike. That is much better to have than a buff of 1.
That's not just a buff. That's a game-ending buff.
Yeah. I do want to talk about another card I don't like. Just a bit of
Sure.
this. I just feel like people are building Typal decks not quite right. Adaptive Automaton is a 3-mana.
This is another
artifact
one that's
creature.
like, it goes in any Typal deck.
It can. So
Yeah.
it as an ETBs, you choose a creature type. It is that type in addition to its other types. It's a 2/2, and it gives other creatures of that type +1/+1. The thing is, there are so many creature types that have one of these already and are just that type. If
Yeah.
you desperately needed one more, like let's say you're building a Goblin deck and you want 10 Lords for some reason, and you only have 8, sure, play Adaptive Automaton, but if you have the choice, play a Goblin. Like, enjoy the flavor of a Goblin over this boring robot that turns into anything.
Yeah, I can see that. Again, if you're in that, like, your really niche area, like maybe you're playing Satyrs or like Kithkin,
Yeah.
and you just want an effect that just makes your board a little bit bigger.
Yeah, like
that's fair.
you can do it. But just, again, like, as I sort of said with some of these other cards, put them towards the bottom of your list when you're choosing the cards you want to keep to
Yep.
actually put in the deck, because you can get other effects that might do it better.
And I guess we'd be remiss not to talk about overrun effects in Typal decks as the
Yeah,
win con. I
It's
feel like
an obvious one.
it's going to be a win con in a lot of decks, even if you're going tall, like I
Yeah.
would be going in Abomination of Llanowar.
Yep.
Because I'm going tall, I may as well run Overwhelming Stampede, because if I have 3 other creatures, all of my creatures will get +X/+X, where X is the power of my commander.
Yep.
It's kind of cracked.
Yeah, totally. Look, like actual Overrun, Overwhelming Stampede, Chroma's Will, they are totally fine and you can totally do those. If you want to be more narrow, Shared Animosity can be busted.
Oh, there's that mono red enchantment.
Yeah,
of
so they
whenever
get +1. Attacking creatures get +1/+0 for each other creature that shares a type with it.
Yeah,
so,
that's big.
Attack with 10 goblins. Goblins get +10/+0.
That's sick.
Goblins and those sorts of smallish types are the ones you want to play it in more. Speaking of, Impact Tremors.
Oh, if you're in a go wide deck, this is very strong.
And obviously Perforos, the one that deals 2 when creatures ETB.
God of the Forge.
Yep.
I think. Yep.
That sounds right. And then, I think the other way you can sometimes go, especially if you're in black-based types like zombies, vampires, and clerics, is you can just play aristocrats.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, especially if you're in vampires. I actually just built my boyfriend a very fun, flavorful vampire deck that is an aristocrats deck.
Yep.
Basically, it's all around the Edgar Markov that transforms, the slumber one that turns into the coffin. It basically it poops out a 1/1 at the beginning of
That's
your turn,
right.
so it's the producer of
Yep.
the commanders.
Yep.
But the win con is actually aristocrats, because
Yeah, cool.
your commander never dies, so you can sack it and
Yep.
sack these 1/1s. So
And it just keeps coming
Yeah.
back. Yeah, it's cool.
I flavored it around Dracula. My boyfriend really loves Dracula, so
Those cards were so cool.
Yeah.
I love the reskin cards that they do.
yeah, and they've got pretty much all of them.
Look, Typal decks are a great way to explore the depths of Magic's most expressive card type, creatures. Whether you're leading a warren full of goblins, an apocalyptic horde of zombies, or a dragon tempest, being the general in a spectacular war between the creatures of the multiverse is something all of us should try at least once, or 11 times. Space Commanders, command received.
That was cheeky.
To the listeners, do you feel commanded? And what Typal decks do you own?
Yeah, you can get in touch with us in plenty of different ways. Twitter, Instagram, Threads, @GetCommanded on all of those social platforms. You can send us an email, but the best way to really talk to us and our play group is in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord.
Definitely.
That's where we hang out. We've had a lot of new people join us from CanCon. So if you're listening and you met Walt and I up at CanCon, thanks so much for being engaging in the Discord. We've really enjoyed you being around.
It's great to have more people in there. We want discussion to be happening all the time, and the
Exactly.
more people in there, the better. And of course, the best way to support the Get Commander podcast is over on Patreon. It's linked in the show notes. It's how we do what we do. It's why these mics sound so good. We would like to thank our patrons Stella Tam, Fuzzy, Bottomless Potamus, and Fraser, and an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting and Wizard Down Under, who support us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best.
I love how that section's becoming longer and longer
getting
each
longer.
time.
We really appreciate it.
We really appreciate all of the cohort and the other generals out there. And very quickly saying thanks off to Palms Go Gaming. Yep. Thanks Palms Off Gaming for sponsoring this podcast. These guys are incredible. Walt and I just picked up a stack of new sleeves ready for 2024. The blackout sleeves are definitely my favorite. If you guys are wanting to get your hands on some of these Palms Off Gaming goodies, go to palmsoffgaming.com/#getcommanded.
That's it.
I nearly did that wrong.
Yep.
palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded. You get 10% off and you support the show while you're shopping on all that stuff as well.
You're going to get sleeves anyway. Might as well do it that way. That's all the magic stuff.
Right,
I
should
reckon.
we teleport back down to Earth?
Oh, yeah.
Sound effects. Wow, we're here.
That's amazing.
The production value is
I
going
know,
up
it's through
every
the
day.
So we're planeswalking out of Magic, obviously, into something else. I think it's your turn. Where are we planeswalking this week?
We're going to Forks in America.
No.
And it's the Forks you're thinking
The
of.
Twilight Saga?
We sure are.
Sick.
Specifically because I recently binge watched all of the Twilight films.
Nice.
And when I say binge watched, there are 5 films.
Uh-huh.
We watched them in 2 nights.
Oh, my word.
So Theo and I had some friends come over. We said, let's watch one of the Twilight, like the first one.
Yeah.
And we were like, that was so good. Let's put it on again. Watch the second one. And then we're awake till like 2 o'clock watching the third
word.
one. And then we literally just last night watched the final
Breaking Dawn,
2.
part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Man.
The reason why I want to shout this out is because I think as many... Like, I think a lot of us, especially the mid-20s, late 20s men, when Twilight came out, we were like, no, it's stupid. It's a love story about vampires. It is so fucking good.
Yeah.
On a rewatch, I was like, okay, I get why, like, Kristen Stewart's acting in the first one is not incredible. Like, in my opinion, like, there were some choices made by the actor or the director that I wouldn't have gone for.
Yep, that's fair.
It just reflects a very cringy teenager, and watching cringe on TV is just
cringy.
It's cringy and a little bit hard. But oh my god, the story, the plot twists, the lore that the vampires have.
Yeah.
Like there's this whole like government of vampires that is like so intricate.
Volturi. Very cool.
And then, like, in the Breaking Dawn Part 1 film, there's, spoiler alert, if you've not seen the Twilight series, Bella gets pregnant.
Yep.
And it's a very intense pregnancy because she's pregnant with a half vampire, half human.
Yep.
And she's basically dying in this pregnancy. So they have to get the baby out very quickly. And I thought it was going to be like one of those, okay, they're going to go behind a closed door, the doctor's going to operate, and everyone, it's going to be that montage of like waiting in the waiting room.
Nope.
No,
that's
it is
not how it happens.
Not like that at all. It is bloody, it is gory. I was floored. Like, you know, like when people say, oh, close your mouth, like my jaw was
hit the floor.
on the floor,
man.
But look, I really enjoyed it, and I genuinely think if you were one of those people, granted, that was like me in high school when this came out, and we're like,
it's so stupid.
It's so stupid. This girl loves 2 boys, and of course, one's a vampire, one's a werewolf. Watch it again.
Yeah,
I seriously recommend it. I said to Walt, like, literally this morning when I came in, and he was like, you watched it? You watched it? It's so good.
It's like, it's popcorn entertainment. So get some mates and sit around and watch it together.
Yeah.
And
honestly, like
especially, with an open mind. Like, just have a good time, you know?
And like, genuinely, like the first film, the stylization of that first film is beautiful.
It's really like stark. It's got a really distinct style, and you can tell they really tried. And I wish that director just got to do all of them, because it was so distinctive.
Did she not do all of them?
No, she only did the first one. And then
that's why it felt so different.
The color palette completely changes after the first one. Look, It's probably TMI. I read all these books when I was a teenager.
So you were like one of the rare male teenagers that were like, I actually secretly love Twilight.
Because all of the girls that I was into were reading it, and I was like, I want to understand what the fuss is about.
So you were reading Twilight to get in with...
No, just like to get it. I was like, well, I don't understand this thing. And then my not aware of my sexuality part of my brain was like reading the very romantic descriptions of Jacob and of
Edward?
Oh my God, Edward! Jesus Christ!
Why am I getting so hot under the collar?
You can tell which my preference was. I can't
Are you a Team Jacob?
In the books when I was 14. Anyway, but I was reading it and I was like, yeah, I understand why a woman would like this. Conceptually, outside of my body, definitely not for me. No. I like the women.
I'm
Only
not
the
sweating
women.
right now. Are you genuinely though? Are you a Team Jacob?
I'm a teen. They both suck these days, to be honest. Like,
yeah, on a watch, yeah.
I don't know.
I'm a Team Edward first and foremost. Like, that's where the love story is.
They just... Oh, look, like, for Bella, it's clear she prefers Edward. Like, that's the choice, and that's fair.
And I want the protagonist to end up with who she loves more.
Yeah,
you know? Like
which makes sense. But they both do, like, some really... Like, Edward is unbelievably controlling of her, like, taking the engine out of her car so she can't drive to see... Did that not make it into the film? Maybe
that's not in the film.
Yeah.
My eyes went super wide
She
there.
straight up, like, is, like, trying to drive to see... Jacob is like, what the hell? And then, like, goes and looks and the engine of her car is gone.
Oh, my God.
And Edward's like, I'm just trying to protect you from him. And has removed
Red
the
flag,
engine. Yeah,
red
huge
flag.
red flag. And then Jacob just does a bunch of manipulative shit. Anyway, it's great fun when you're a teenager, and the films are very fun. And look, like the actors,
Definitely
like acted their heart out, and like it's good fun.
Grab a bunch of mates, and look, I have so much new respect for Robert Pattinson, especially after his role in Batman.
Yep,
love that man. But
he's always been great. Even back then, he did the role really well.
Yeah, he did Cedric Diggory really well as well.
Yep.
He's a good actor.
Guy. That's all we have time for, I reckon. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.
Bye.